Now welcome Dr. Dale Klein, Professor and Cockrell Family Dean's Chair in Engineering Excellence at the University of Texas at Austin.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Things Nuclear. So it's really exciting to be able to say nuclear in public. My name is Dale Klein. I was Associate Vice Chancellor for Research at UT System. My tenure is at UT Austin. And so that was one of the reasons that I could be irreverent when I was chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I always knew where I was going to come back, and so I was not looking for my next job. So it's my pleasure to be the moderator today for John Hopkins, the CEO of NuScale. I've known John for a number of years, and John has really developed a great technology and is the only one that has a current license by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for a small modular reactor. And I was at a program about 2 weeks ago with Derek Haas was a moderator from UT, and we had two other victims on the panel, Daniel Womack from Dow and Yasser Arafat from ALO. And Derek asked them the question, what was your biggest issue that you had as you started down the path of modular reactors? And he said, if you'd asked me that question a year ago, it would have been the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But they said, now that is not our biggest concern. And so John has had a unique situation. Not only did he go through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission process once, he went it through twice when they did a power uprate. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has two fundamental ways where you can get a license. One is under what's called Part 50, where you get a construction permit, and then after you build it, and then you have to go back to the NRC to get a mother may I operate it. And the industry got a little nervous about that, where they had to spend several $1 billion, and they would then have interveners that could tie them up in courts for a long time. So they created what is called Part 52. And under Part 52, you do a design certification, a standardized design, and then you get that concept license, and then you only have to address site-specific issues. And then it's between John and the NRC to do that process and to get the final operating license. So, John, in terms of, you had actual real experience dealing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, not only once but twice. So could you just talk about your experience?
Certainly.
Positives and negatives.
Before I start, though, Dr. Klein, I'd like to give you a shout out for your recent induction into the National Academy of Engineering. And I love the reason he was chosen. Dr. Klein was chosen for leadership in the development of programs that enhance the safety of nuclear power plants around the world. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yeah, going back to the NRC, my career, I did a stint with government, and mostly in oil and gas, and then I was long-term with an engineering procurement construction firm, and I had the opportunity to build plants all around the world, chemical plants, and involved in the offshore wind farm at Greater Gabbard in the UK. We did PV solar, and so when the notion of NuScale came about, it was right after Fukushima, and I got a call from a CEO of a company and said, have you heard of this company? And long story short, I got engaged, and we elected to invest in this very small company. And soon after that, during the Obama administration, DOE went through a funding opportunity assessment, and we competed against the majors. I think there was 8 maybe at the time. And I'll never forget, I got a call on December 14th, 2013 from Ernie Moniz, at the time Secretary of Energy, saying, you've been awarded $276 million. Now, at the time, I thought there was going to be 2 awards. It'd be somebody like NuScale and a name brand. And he said, no, NuScale knocked it out of the park. So that money helped the cost of getting through the NRC. However, in 2008, and this was 2013, our Chief Technology Officer engaged with the NRC, Dr. Jose Reyes, who worked for the NRC. And part of my diligence when I was talking to Dr. Reyes, how it came about, and why did you not go thorium and why light water? And he said, John, all the regulators in the world pretty much know light water, and we'll stay with light water. So in 2016, we submitted our design certification application, as you stated in a Part 10 CFR Part 52. I had no appreciation what it took around the rigor of safety and health. By 2016, we had already invested in pre-application about $12 million. Going through that process, we did submit what the NRC said at the time was the most thorough application they ever seen. And we went through its 12,000 pages of technical support. We ended up spending over 800,000 hours with internal as well as our suppliers in pulling together, getting to the DCA. And the fee component was relatively small. What we had to do with the NRC, Dale, was the NRC knew large water reactors. They did not really understand small modular reactors. So it was really around economies of scale versus economies of small. So when you'd say, we don't need a hydrogen combiner, they say, prove it. So a lot of what we had to do is proof of concept of getting through the NRC. Like every component we've had has been tested and scaled. Our helical coil steam generators, we tested at Via Vicenza Labs in Siena, Italy. And they've done it before, so they were tested to scale. Our heat flux test, everything. We use conventional fuel. Framatome is our supplier, manufactured fuel in Hanford. But it was an extremely daunting challenge. And when we started off as 12 module, 50 megawatt, and we came to the realization after a lot of engineering hours that we were overly conservative and that we could push towards 80 megawatts. So we went through a power up rate. And again, that was getting through that process. We completed that 3 months early this year. So we're ready to design build. We have a construction and operating license. We have a developed COLA that we could use probably 70% of the COLA today. So we're in discussions with customers. And the other thing that we have, which we'll get into in a minute, we have most of our long lead items, we invested in years ago. So, and I'll talk about that when we talk about supply chain. But it was, and what's happening right now when I'm hearing about streamlining the NRC, there's absolutely some areas that can be streamlined, but hopefully they'll never touch the rigor it took from a safety and health perspective, because as we go around the world, the NRC is looked at as a gold standard.
Great. Well, thanks, John. Yeah, one of the things that it really is important that John commented on, when I was chairman of the NRC, we basically had two divisions for reactors. We had the non-power reactors, the research reactors around the United States, mainly universities. And then we had the big reactors. And when you think about the amount of staffing that we had and the amount of focus that the NRC devoted, it was really on those big power reactors. And so on the research reactor side, they would have some of the similar concepts that John talked about. If someone shifted from the power side to the research reactor regulatory side, the first thing they would know was how many armed guards do you have? What's your fence? All of those kinds of activities that you have to have on a power side, but you do not have to have on a research reactor side. So John did have to break a little bit of glass to get that culture change, because the power density for SMRs is much different. So his emergency plan is a much smaller footprint. He doesn't have to have a reactor operator for every module. But you had to go through that process so the NRC would feel comfortable with it. So I think what John has done at NuScale is he's led the pathway for SMRs to follow, because he's took the bullets to sort of get the staff trained to think differently in that area. So that is a difference. Well, when you looked at the power up rate, after you went through Part 52 for your design cert and power up rate, Was there any lessons learned that it was more efficient, or was it still pretty bureaucratic?
No, as you said, the NRC is a pretty prescriptive process. And, you know, going through that process, there were a lot of firsts, as you said. You know, it took us 42 months to get through the licensing process, which was the quickest of any technology at the time because we had such a thorough DCA. But it took us 7 years to prove to the NRC that we could, in fact, be at site boundary for emergency planning zone. And why that's important, obviously, is a lot of the customers we're talking today, if it's process-oriented companies or utilities, or they don't want to be inside the evacuation zone of a 12-mile or 10-mile. If you can be at close to the fence line for the end user and they recognize that there's no business interruption to them. Also, obviously, on process heat, the further away, the more the heat dissipates, so the closer you are to the end user, the better. So the other areas that we had approved to the NRC, you know, Fukushima hit. It wasn't the earthquake, obviously, as everybody knows. It was a tsunami that knocked out the backup generation. We had to prove to the NRC we have no need for backup AC or DC power. They approved it. And then the prevailing thought with the NRC, if we have a 12-module plan at 77 MW, that's 924. We're approaching a gigawatt size. The prevailing thinking was you'd need an operator for every module, to your point. We proved to them we don't. So we got to prove we only need 3 operators. And, you know, again, for cost savings and that, it's pretty significant. So hopefully, to your point, I don't want to be a monopoly. My competition is state-owned enterprises, right? It's China, it's Russia. It's not. We need other American technologies to be successful. I am hopeful that it will help paving the way. I really am. And it's a small industry. We call ourselves competimates. You know, we made some hacks compete, but we're also, you know, we work together as an industry. So,
Well, one of the things that being a recovering regulator that I'm really anxious to see is somebody to turn dirt, you know, in terms of, you know, we have too many paper reactors. I want to see a real one. You know, I want to see one that makes neutrons, makes electricity so that the public can benefit from safe, reliable, predictable, affordable nuclear energy. So we're on that path. Talk a little bit about this company that you are working with called Intra1.
Certainly. It's I think it was about this time last month, September, on stage, we had the CEO of TVA, the CEO of Intra1, and myself explaining to the audience, and it was a combination of NEI and ANS, about 1,500 people, and TVA explained, you know, why did they select Intra1. So my vision, and it always has been, we're the Intel inside of a Dell computer I keep using. So all I want to do, I don't want to be a manufacturer, I don't want to be a developer, I want to be able to bring NuScale power modules into an owner's plant. For about 4 years, we worked with Intra1 as a developer, where they did a significant amount of due diligence, you know, wanting to get in. Their background was more combined cycle plants and building plants all over the world. But they started doing a lot of due diligence on nuclear, and they selected NuScale to help go to market with. So we formed a joint venture relationship. They worked extensively with our tier 1 banks. Now, banks in the U.S. don't necessarily want to finance a nuclear power plant. That's a big problem in our industry right now, is getting that financing and the ability to. So the banks are looking at assets under management. So Intra1 provides, you know, if you look at NuScale kind of as an anchor in a mall, they're also looking at advanced gas technologies, because I do believe gas is not going anywhere. We complement gas, like we can complement renewables and load following. So the banks got interested. And when we were going through a year of due diligence with the banks, one of the senior executives' aha moment was, I had no appreciation that NuScale has invested almost $2 billion de-risking this asset. $2 billion is what we invested, because there was a lot of costs associated with half the proof of concept of working through that NFC process. And so where we are now, we started co-marketing about a year ago. Intra1 has been working with TVA for almost a year, and because TVA had to do their own due diligence. And so we're through the cost aspects, you know, and they made the announcement of 6 gigawatts of you know, plants, you know, on, you know, a variety of different sites for TVA. I think they're at 7 states. So things that people don't appreciate, I don't think, is how much effort we put into our design. Our standard plant design, we're 90% complete. Now, you have site-specific engineering. They really appreciate that. Another aha is that we took TVA, we mentioned our supply chain, critical, because that's our lifeblood. You know, I look around, there's a lot of people here that we're currently work with Framatome, with our fuel, conventional fuel, less than 5%, Paragon. I just had lunch with Doosan, where we're manufacturing our modules right now in Korea, and many others, Curtiss-Wright. We've been working with these suppliers for years. And not only are they strategic suppliers, but many of them are investors. Japan Bank of International Corporation is a Japanese government entity that invested over $100 million into NuScale. And what do they want? Post-Fukushima, you know, and you know better than anybody with your relationship with TEPCO, you know, Japan had to shut down, I don't know, 50 plus reactors, right? And so they're re-energized at 11, but they want to roll out SMRs. I don't ever believe we'll build in Japan, but they certainly would probably want a license, because we also just had Shibu Electric invest in us. So just a lot of stuff that's going on right now. And so we're excited about the time. It's taken a while, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train, I hope.
One thing that John commented on that I want to amplify and let him talk a little bit more about it, and that is, once you get a license, you then have to turn that license into construction documents that you can actually build. And I serve on the board of Southern Company. When we started Vogtle 3 and 4, the design was not complete. Even though they had built reactors in China, the design in the U.S. were different, and they did not have those construction drawings. And it was very painful to start up that whole supply chain. But the key thing was, it's hard to have a real good cost estimate if you don't have those detailed engineering drawings. Could you talk a little bit about how long it took you to do those engineering drawings so you could actually build from?
Yeah, and again, it's like I said, we just getting through the NRC, 800,000 hours, and we're 90% are a standard plant, then you have site engineering, you know, specific, if it's a hard rock site or soft rock sites, that it wasn't just our internal engineers, it was also working with our suppliers, and how, like Sergeant Lundy is a good example, was an investor in us. And so working through that, it took multiple years to get to where we are today. Because what we didn't want to do, and I've built plants all over the world, and it's the same in anywhere I go. You know, if you're going to go build, particularly on a lump sum basis, you want to have a thorough design complete so you truly understand your cost of doing business. And part of what we did with the banks, we had to prove, we had some raw costs of what it took, you know, to actually do this. And it was based on, you know, our 3D drawings and all our engineering deliverables that we have to bring forth. At TVA, Interone is already in conversations, not conversations or beyond that, with EPC companies and the Sergeant Lundys in the world. So they're putting together the pool of people that's necessary to build these plants. In the model about the other aspect, we are a truly modular company. And my vision had always been we'll have a NuScale Americas, a NuScale Europe, and NuScale Asia. But what we do is we build them, the NSSS, a lot of the risk stuff is built in a factory, and these are fungible assets that can be shipped anywhere. So as I'm building in a factory, the civil works is being done in the field. So I actually don't bring my modules in until the plant's constructed. And then because of the scalability, each of our unit is 77 megawatt. It comes in 4 components that can be shipped, and it was done purposely because we've done transportation studies. So we ship them, and we bring them in one at a time, and we have its own dedicated turbine generator set on the top. So we can get 1 or 2 operational while the remainder come in. And so for cities of the future, and why hyperscalers like it, is again, we could bring on additional power up to 924, 12 of these modules over a period of time. And the alternative is after a 60-year life cycle, or maybe 80, we could take, when we decommission, we just take them out one at a time, and the building's still there. So it's just a different mindset, different concept. And this was the result of Dr. Jose Reyes. He didn't take a large reactor and shrink it down. The challenge by DOE at the time under a program was, how safe could you make an SMR? That's what they call it, multiple application small light water reactors. So he took a clean sheet of paper and built it from the bottoms up. working with our labs, particularly Idaho National Lab.
Well, that's good. You know, the other thing that we've learned many, many times is you need that supply chain. So you can have your design cert, you can have your drawings, but then you actually need some components inside. And you don't get a reactor vessel or a steam generator at Walmart. You know, you have to sort of plan ahead and get those in that. So could you talk a little bit about your supply chain, how you have that?
Yeah, that's our lifeblood. And like I said, we've been working with a lot of our suppliers for 15 plus years. And as I commented before, not only key strategic suppliers, here's the other thing that we noticed. We came to the realization 75% of our supply chain is domestic, US based. However, in the areas like forgings and that, we just did not have the capacity in the US, so we went to Korea and Japan that had excess capacity because they really bet heavily on the gigawatt size that was going to never really materialize post-Fukushima. So they gave us very competitive rates, and they also invested in us. So when we would go around the country to US suppliers, the natural inclination for suppliers, show me the order book, and then we'll tool up. And so what TVA has done, you know, this is a government entity, right? They make their money like a privately held company in that they make their money off electricity, and they take no taxpayer dollars for funding, but they are a government entity. And so they're shareholders of the government, and the government really wants SMRs, advanced nuclear, to move forward. So that's been a real plus for us. So that's supply chain. And so what's happened, we just had a supplier day in Charlotte, North Carolina. We had over 100 suppliers coming. So suppliers who before were kind of hands-off, say, you know, show me. They're all from Missouri. And then once we know that you're real, then we want to get more engaged. And that's what's happening currently.
So how many reactor vessels and steam generators, because you already have some made, so how many do you have in your closet?
Well, currently, Doosan has the capacity to have 20 modules a year. And we just had lunch with them today, and they're going to build out another train. So we're working extremely close with Doosan. And so right now, we've got 12 modules in production. We have 6, you know, pretty much ready to go. And in fact, we just invited Maria Korsnick with NEI to go visit the factory to actually see them. Because it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually go and touch the steel and actually see the tube bending of the helical coil steam generator, how it's being built. I mean, that's all happening right now. So, you know, when people say, you know, we could be, you know, COD by the end of the decade, if the customer's willing to move, we could have modules in the ground by the end of the decade because of these long lead items that we ordered 4 years ago.
So tell a little bit more about the TVA arrangement. How many do you think you might sell? And
well, that's what we're working through right now. TVA announced 6 gigawatts. For us, that means 72 NuScale power modules, 72. How fast they're going to gear up and how many plants at any given time, that's what we're in discussions of. So, but as I said before, our model was never to build one-off plants because we're built in the factory. We could ship these to multiple sites at any given time because the model is predicated on having not just one plant built at any given time. So we could, in fact, you know, have multiple sites going on within the 6 states or 7 states of TVA. So that's where we are in the discussions.
so when you have your modules, you know, you can obviously, being in Texas, everybody knows what a 6-pack is. So you have your 6-pack model. What are your other units? Do you have a 4-pack, a 6-pack, a 12-pack?
Yeah, what we found is, if you think 5 years ago, 4 years ago, what was the market potential? Coal plant refurbishment. We have a lot of coal coming off, you know, within the end of the decade. And a lot of them, you know, 300 to 400 megawatts, so they're looking at 6 units or 8 units. You know, for the economics to work, we need at least 6 units. With the hyperscalers, and what TVA plans to do is we can actually work behind the meter. So you bring these in. Part of the NRC, we had to prove the NRC for safety. I don't have to be connected to the grid. I don't know if there's any other reactor that could say we do not have to be connected to the grid to be, you know, for dispatchable power. So, I mean, that's that's what we're all about right now. I mean, we're excited about it, but we could do multiple sites at any time. So it's up to the customer. And the beauty of the Intra One model and why customers like it is Inter1 is willing to take many of the first-of-kind risks. So they will go to a customer. TVA is the off-taker. Inter1 is the owner on a TVA site. So TVA's model is predicated, okay, we will build own, more than likely we'll get an operator, hopefully in this case it's TVA. We'll build own, or we could build own transfer. Even some of the utilities said, we'd love to keep this off our balance sheet until it's mechanically complete or commercially complete. Once you turn the keys on, then we'll take over the plant itself. So it's very flexible how that model works, which when I talk with process companies, utilities, they don't generally want to own a nuclear asset. Give me 24/7 reliable, clean energy. If I go to Baytown, Texas, and I see a fence line, and I got BASF, and I got DuPont, and I got Shell, and we could build that plant right there, and if Shell wants energy for hydrogen production or ammonia production, and BASF wants it for electricity, we can provide that. And that's the other exciting part about this. And we're very bullish on Texas. I got 30 plus people now in Houston. We're going to build our operational center in Houston, and we're starting that process. And why? Texas, right? It's why is everybody here for the most part? This has been a phenomenal conference, but everybody says, is Texas real? And you would know better than anybody. And,
well, one thing that I think those of you that have either been in Texas or affiliated with it, Texas has a positive attitude and a can-do spirit. And I think a lot of that has come out of the Wildcat days when you look at people that were risk takers that would go out and try these things. And so I think the business climate is very positive in Texas. I think the challenge that we have in Texas as well as other places, nuclear is high CapEx. Once you get that plant built, then you have a pretty predictable cost for 60 to 80 or maybe even 100 years. Yeah. If you have a natural gas plant, you can get those if you're already in the queue and you can get a gas turbine. If you're not in the queue for a gas turbine, you're in trouble right now. But if you can get a gas turbine, low CapEx, and then your fuel cost, though, can really swing. And I think that's where if you want to have stability and predictability, you need an energy mix. And that's why I appreciate your comments. It's not nuclear or gas, it's nuclear and gas.
Dr. Klein, I look at Texas, everything you said, the amount of capital that's in this state, the labor part, the amount of labor in engineering, having worked in Houston 3 different times, started my career with Conoco in Houston, the airport, the university structures that we have here, I strongly believe Texas could be the Silicon Valley of energy. And I heard somebody say that, and we believe it. And so we're very strong in other states, like I said, in Tennessee and elsewhere, but I believe we're at a tipping point as an industry right now because I travel globally. We're building a plant, right? I say we're doing the front-end engineering design in Romania currently. And the reason we're in Romania is because our administrations wanted to keep China out. And so they said, we have an American near-term deployable technology, we'll bring it to Romania. So Fluor Corporation is the prime, we're the sub to them. But, they've paid the licenses fees, they continue to pay us, we hope it comes to fruition. But when I look around the world, Central, Eastern Europe, it's really about energy security. The taxonomy of finance, they're talking about as a EU, realization that energy or nuclear energy has to be part of the mix. Even Germany, right? When I was with Hergé Grossman at Davos when Merkel announced they're going to shut down 17 reactors in Germany with RWE, and it was like, what? And it was for political reasons for a while, but now what's happening? The price of electricity is pushing businesses out of Germany. They have to reconsider. One of those reconsiderations is nuclear. I just spoke at the University of Southern California, and I was amazed how the receptivity of Diablo Canyon, keeping that up and going, how many jobs it is, and what 3,000 megawatts of electricity they need to keep it. So the groundswell is changing. And it could be energy security. Obviously, climate disruption is still a big piece of this. On the DoD side, they just announced a program called Janus within the Army. In fact, they mentioned NuScale by name as the only U.S. deployable near-term, licensed. So who knows what's going to happen next? But
Well, one thing I think the Texas Nuclear Alliance was very effective in was helping get some state funding to both look at the supply chain and long-term energy plans. What kind of a signal did that send to the market, since you're in that business, for a state to commit that kind of money?
Oh, it's, we were very fortunate to have gone through a competitive process with you. If you look at any innovative technologies from combustion engineering, generally it always starts with state funding, right, of some sort. And you need that to get kick-started. Right now we're at the point with how we've developed this, and my CFO sitting right here in the audience, and how we worked at the market. We have enough cash for 3 years of run rate. So, and with the relationship with Intra1, if I could ask the government for anything, it's help to defray the initial first-of-a-kind construction risk. I don't need their money, but it'd really be good to have some guarantee, and not just NuScale, for the industry, to really get this thing where customers could feel more comfortable that they don't have to worry about construction risk. Now, Intra1, they're willing to assume the construction risk. And the reason, Dale, that they did, because they did extensive research on us before they ever made a commitment to join us. And that's where it took 3 years of modeling with Intra1 and the 8 Tier 1 banks. I mean, these are the major banks that worked with us to actually help model this program. So we're excited about it.
Well, thanks. Let's give John a great hand for being the first out of the chute. And we look forward to turning dirt.
Thank you.
Thank you all.